Good morning and welcome to Atheist Torah Study. My name is Emma, and this is my kitty Biscuit. And anyways, I'm here today to discuss Parsha Beha'alotcha, which is Numbers chapter 8 to Numbers chapter 12 in the Torah. So, Atheist Torah Study is the exploration of the Torah from my perspective as an atheist. It's a year-long project I've been on where I go through the Jewish Torah one parsha at a time. And a parsha is it's a section of the Torah. It's usually two or three chapters. Sometimes it's as many as five or six. And I just basically discuss the text from my perspective as an atheist, taking in what I know and understand about Jewish tradition. So, again, today we're going to be discussing. This is by far since I don't really speak Hebrew, and so I'm not like I mean, I speak a little bit, but I'm not a very fluent Hebrew speaker. So this is by far the most difficult parsha for me to pronounce. It's Behaalotcha, Alotcha. It's Alotcha, Behaalotcha. Um, and oh, um, I knew what that meant, and I've already forgotten it. Let me see what it means. What does Behaalotcha mean? Um, when you raise up or when you cause to ascend. So I guess it's supposed to be about, oh, it's about the menorah. That's right. So let's talk about what goes on in this parsha. And then we will start reading it. So in this parsha, the God character in the story tells Aaron to light a menorah. The Levites are formally dedicated to religious service. Um, That's one of the tribes. The Israelites celebrate Passover and receive rules for those who missed it. A cloud guides people through the wilderness. One of my favorite parts. I actually do like that part. I kind of like the idea of following a cloud around. Silver trumpets are used to organize the camp. And then I think where we're actually going to start, I'm going to skip over the menorah and all that stuff in the clouds. We're going to start with where the people are complaining because that's definitely the best part of the whole book. So the people begin complaining. They miss the food they had in Egypt and grow tired of eating manna. Moses becomes overwhelmed by the burden of leadership and complains to God. And then they have this like otherworldly experience of meeting God. So that's why I want to pick that part because it's like it's really interesting. And then two men, Eldad and Medad, begin prophesying outside the official leadership structure. I hope we get to that part too. Causing concern. Moses wishes that everyone could prophesy. So, and finally, Miriam criticizes Moses apparently over his Cushite wife and his unique authority. God punishes Miriam with a skin disease, and she's temporarily excluded from the camp. So, actually, you know what? I think we're going to start with the very last part, the part about Miriam, because it's just so bizarre. Um, so, where we are in the timeline of the story is at least the story as this part of the Torah is written. The redactors have put the characters in the wilderness, and they're about to enter the promised land. Oh no, no, no. Yeah, they're getting close to the promised land because it's only a couple 100 miles walk, basically. Um, so, but it's taken them a year. It's taken them a year to walk like a few miles. And anyways, so yeah, let's just get into it. Okay, I'm gonna go find this. I want to start with the part about Miriam, just because it's really weird, and I really love it. I mean, I I really enjoy reading the Torah. I mean, I I've been listening to Madeline. I've been listening to Madeline Murray O'Hare a lot this week, and I've really been enjoying it. I mean, I didn't really know enough about Madeline Murray O'Hare. And one of the things that I've been doing as part of my studies is I've really been learning more about kind of the founders of atheism. It started with I got a really good education on Democritus because I didn't really know that much about Democritus. And I've learned about the role that Democritus played in basically creating a really materialistic philosophy about um, the the world and the universe. And um, Democritus's ideas were just completely materialistic. There wasn't anything supernatural about his ideas. He didn't have any kind of supernatural element to his philosophies and his theories about the world. And Democritus was a contemporary of Aristotle and Plato. And these things, these are all happening around, really close in time and place. I mean, the Torah is being written over in the Levant, but I have no doubt that the Torah is really being influenced by the Greeks. I mean, it's just undeniable the Greek influence on the text. It's not directly on the text, but it's a reaction to the Greek. And then there's also a lot of underlying ideas that have been transmuted through the cultures um, to the redactors. So I just have no doubt that there's Greek influence. And I mean, just like the way that Western culture eventually played out over the centuries was that all of these different traditions kind of rolled into it. I mean, the Greek rolled into Western tradition, the Middle Eastern rolled into Western tradition. Um, Eventually, Western tradition was deeply influenced by all of these different traditions, the Celts, you know, the the Visigoths, the Goths, the cultures from the northern Mediterranean, North Africa, all of these different cultures help to shape Western tradition, and these all found places within the broader society. I mean, history is a collage patchwork of influences, and there's no there's really so much of the it's really interesting because when you really think about it, so much of the text here, it starts off really broadly mythopoetic and kind of starts off with this broad creation narrative. And then eventually it gets to the point where the text wants to really isolate this particular group of people, and it wants to isolate them with relationship to their God. And it also wants to isolate them with relationship to their national identity. And the text really pushes this idea of this distinctiveness. And I mean, I don't know if every I imagine this was pretty common. I mean, I think part of what's driving this too, in a way, it's like, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot as I've been doing this Torah study that, I think that, like, what is this religion? What is it an analog of? And it's like, I think, well, this religion is an analog of a period in time when people lived in basically city states and they had small, territorial nation state provinces. And what they did was, excuse me just a minute. Anyways, I think that, in some ways, like the Torah and Jewish tradition it's like it's the memory of a system in which the world was a lot. I mean, there were basically two power systems at play at this time in the West. There were small kingdoms, which were small territorial entities like Israel and like all of the countries Israel mentions, in the Bible that are kind of like adjacent to it. And I mean all around the world, I mean all around the known world at the time. There were like these small kingdoms basically. And then there's these large kind of super colonizing empires that are trying to have more control, and so like you basically had the religion of the small kingdom, and then you had the religion of kind of the super colonizing empire. And the super colonizing empires go all the way back. I mean, even back to the days of Ur, you already have this pattern at work. I can't remember what the name was of the super colonies that were already getting going in like 2400s, 2500 BCs, but I mean, obviously you had Egypt. So Egypt is always the really easy local example. Um, and Egypt, I mean, and then you have the Assyrians and the Akkadians. That's what it was. You had the Akkadians, the Assyrians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and then the Hittites, and then eventually, of course, you had the Greeks, and then right after the Greeks, you had the Romans, and it's like, in my mind, like Judaism is a memory of one of Judaism is a memory of a certain kind of political organization. I mean, it's intended as it's really interesting though, because one of the things that makes Judaism distinct, and this is something that it's carried from the past all the way to the present, is that it has the memory of itself as a small territorial kingdom. And it's carried that memory all the way through time. I mean, in diaspora around the world, and then back to Israel after they stole the land from the Palestinians or conquered it, whatever you want to say. And but it's because it's preserved in the memory of the text. That's what's held that together. So the text has really played an important role in preserving this fragment of an identity, which I think is it's a natural process. I mean, well, I don't know if any of this is natural. This is all very strange, honestly. Oh, hang on just a minute. Anyhow, so as part of my learning, I've really been trying to learn about um, Western atheism because, I mean, I've always been an atheist, but I've never really known that much about, what are the foundations of atheism. I mean, because like as far as I know, atheists, we don't really have any kind of organized institutions. I mean, I mean, we have some. So anyway, so one of the people I've really been spending a lot of time listening to this week was Madeline Murray O'Hair. And I've known about Madeline Murray O'Hair my whole life, but I just didn't realize what a dynamic speaker she was. I mean, she was just so cutting edge for her time. I mean, here's this woman who is just like super intelligent and is going, I mean, she's doing the same kind of media spectacle that a lot of politicians do nowadays to get power, but she was doing it in the promotion of atheism, the cause of atheism, and she was Madeline Murray O'Hair was responsible for keeping prayer out of the public schools in a landmark U.S. Supreme Court case in 1963. And that's exactly what's being challenged right now. And she was great. Anyway, I've been learning more about her. But the one who I really learned about this, and since I started this in the last couple of weeks, has been Democritus. Oh my God, and Democritus just so amazing. I mean, the story of Democritus, and he basically Democritus theorized that the world was made of atoms, and he did this. It's really interesting learning about how Democritus did it because Democritus lived on the outskirts of of Greece. I mean, he was in a city that was on the border. It was up in the it was out on the outskirts of the Greek Empire at the time. But he did come from a pretty well-to-do family. So, I mean, he had privilege, but the way that he got to his ideas was he traveled all around the world. I mean, the known world at the time. He went to Egypt, he went to India, um, he went to a lot of places in between, and he spent years and years just studying with people that he considered to be very knowledgeable and learned people in the places where he traveled to. And when he came back from his travels, and he was really interested in philosophy. I mean, the elites in Greece at the time like studied philosophy. That's one of the things they did. He came up with this idea that basically nobody had ever imagined before, that the world is made of atoms. That and it's not just that the world is made of atoms, but that everything everywhere is made of atoms. That the stars in the sky are atoms, and that the air is atoms and that everything that you are is atoms. And it's like, I mean, he didn't have any electron microscopes. He didn't have any foundational science theory to support his rational intuition. But it, I mean, what was really foundational to his, like, there are a couple of ideas that were really foundational to Democritus's view of a materialistic universe. And one of the very first ones was he had to reject a supernatural explanation of existence. I mean, he had to look at the world as it was. And it's really interesting because even within Greek culture, this wasn't normally possible. I mean, the Greek philosophy followed the line of Aristotle and Plato, and they argued they argued against supernaturalism. No, they argued in favor of supernaturalism because Democritus went against supernaturalism. He basically said that the universe was materialistic and that it was foundationally rational, understandable, um, and that it could be understood by, I mean, the big thing was that the universe was the same everywhere. I mean, he didn't just limit his idea about what the boundaries were. of what his observations were. He applied it to everything that he could see, you know, anything that he could see, he had a theory of atoms that he believed applied to it. And it was so revolutionary, just so radical. It just, and it's continued to undermine religion ever since it was first thought of. And he didn't just, I mean, he didn't get the idea just out of his own head. I mean, he did get a lot of it from his own thinking, but he also got it from traveling around and talking to a lot of other cultures. He also got a lot of his ideas from the Indian people of the Indian subcontinent because he went there and there were atheists, quote unquote atheists. I can't remember what their name was right now. I could look that up. Maybe I should look that up since I'm talking about it. Just a minute. Well, there's a school of Indian tradition that is fundamentally materialistic, but they don't really know if Democritus actually studied with those people. He's just reputed through oral tradition to have gone and studied in India. And there was a materialistic school in India that rejected the gods, rejected all claims of divinity, and claimed that the universe was fundamentally materialistic. So, anyways, um, let's get to the text because I could just go on about this for, but so where we're going to go at to in the text right now, now this parsha, um, Parsha Beha'alotcha, is not really, the parsha is really intended to kind of move the audience, the reader along. And it's part of like, I mean, I think that by the time that the Torah is being written in the second or third century BCE, when it's really being put together into a document that's really meant to be a foundational document for belief structure. Um, the text is doing a whole series of things here. But what it's really trying to do is it's trying to forge a mythic vision of the past. And similar to the similar to the Odyssey and the Iliad, Homer's Odysseus, this the characters in this story, which are the entire people of Israel, are being brought on this mythic journey. And so there's the language in this particular parsha and especially in this parsha are intended to give give the reader a sense of movement and also kind of a forging of national identity. So this parsha in particular is really, really rich for atheists because it contains a lot of the tools that still continue to be used all the way to this day by religious people who make claims of um, how you actually have these intercessionary kind of experiences with the divinity. Um, I mean, there's a lot of places in the Torah where it's really not clear exactly, well, what are the mechanics of how this all happens? You know, these claims of supernatural, you know, experience. And here the text is doing something that I've talked about before. It's doing something that is very modern in a way, but it's also doing what people realized that text could do probably by this time in world history. I mean, texts were not some new invention. I mean, texts have been around for thousands of years, and people began to understand how a text could influence mass psychology because the idea that the text in itself is like what I think one of the things that's unique about the Torah and part of why the Torah became kind of a blueprint document for how to do religion is because, up until the Torah, I mean, the idea always was that the religion belonged to the temple, it belonged to the king, you know, it was the pyramid, but it's like nobody worships the pyramids anymore. I mean, at one time, whatever kind of religion there was that the Pharaoh had going, that was like everybody's religion. But the Torah is different because it even, I mean, at the same, the people did have a temple. There's a lot of, and I imagine like if they were rewriting the Torah now, knowing what they know about world history and about the way that things went. I mean, I wonder if they would have spent quite so much time on the temple. They probably would have realized, oh, we don't even need the temple. We have the text. And but I don't know. I mean, the point of the whole point of the text is that you have someplace you're leaving and you have someplace to go, you know. So it's like it it's it's hard to get away from that. It's like the text is like, well, you're leaving, you have to leave, and then you have to come back. And it's like that's kind of that's the basic idea of the Torah. It's like it's a really simple idea. It's like it's something everybody does every day. You have to leave and then you have to come back. But it's like they put the whole thing into like this grand document that implicates everything in the universe. So, but my point is that the text itself is what's the essential sacred document. And I mean, I think that the redactors already understood this. And it wasn't just that they understood that about the text. They understood this about nature. They understood this about human nature. There was something about, and they understood this about language. So they were essentially propagandists. But but well, they were propagandists, but I mean, I don't think that they understood. I don't think they understood what propaganda was, but I think they understood that language, which, language originally had been developed as, pictographs, and then over time the language lost its connection to the symbols and became sounds. And then the sounds got reoriented into these blocks of texts that were essentially kind of mathematical in a way. And those blocks of text then became placeholders for the real world. And so suddenly you had this new system of encoding information that was completely disconnected from almost any abstraction. I mean, once you make a pictograph, you're already making an abstraction. But this was like so much more manipulatable. And so once they had these tools, then they could do anything. We still can do anything with language. I mean, we can make up complete fantasies about everything and call it language, and then we think it's real. And we're still trapped in this miasma of the written word. We're still trapped in it. And as soon as we have that article, as soon as we have the article of the written word, then we're able to make vast, vast claims. And those claims are not subject to um, those claims are not subject to verifiability, especially claims around God. And so all of a sudden we've gone, I mean, this is going on 3,000 years ago. I mean, the elites are already doing this. They've discovered this The elites discovered this going way back, all the way back to, I mean, I'm pretty sure that as soon as we started building ziggurats, this is already happening. It's like it's a drug. I mean, it really is a drug. It's the opium of the masses. And it's not just the opium of the masses, it's the opium of everyone. It's this idea that once you're able to take this system of encoding information and turn it back against itself so that what originally came out of like counting beans, it really did. It came out of like counting beans and making marks for inventories. It evolved into an elaborate system of, uh, you know, I mean, this the pictographs, which by the time we were doing these pictographs, that we tried to make as many pictographs of the world as we could. We tried to squeeze them into small spaces as we could. Um, by the time we were doing that, we were already hooked. We're already hooked on this cocaine. And then once language became dissociated from pictographical imagery and was able to be reassembled as an alphabet and then projected back onto the world, by the time that had happened, this whole project was already totally underway. And what we could do with it is what the text is exploring. I mean, because even though this is all really amazing, there's still not a lot of people who can do it. I mean, most people are not literate at the time the text is written. The ones who are literate, are highly educated. And in addition to being highly educated, they're indoctrinated. They've been it's and being indoctrinated isn't it's a rite of passage. I mean, being indoctrinated just, I mean, when I say the word indoctrinated now, it has a pejorative, it has a pejorative term. I mean, I've used it a lot. I've talked about how I was indoctrinated into Western monotheism. And, this whole project for me is just an attempt to like kind of unscrew Western monotheism in some ways from my brain. Of course, I realize that you can't really do it. I mean, part of what indoctrination is about is it's about having something imprinted in your in your brain before you have any ability to know what's being imprinted in your brain. It's really terrible. I mean, it's really awful. But but this has just been happening. I mean, this has been happening by this time in history. This is definitely anybody who's educated, who's elite, who has access to language is also indoctrinated. They're indoctrinated into whatever indoctrination is the one that's the flavor of their area and of their elites. And so, yeah, of course, the writers of the Torah are indoctrinated into this version of monotheism. But they're not just indoctrinated, they're also making new inventions. They're adjusting the ideas and they're trying out some new things. And this is where the Greek comes in. The Greek comes in, it's not that there's I mean there's some Greek in the text, there's not much Greek in the text. But what's happening is that, and this is why I'm a big fan of the idea that this was written somewhere around, the third century BC. I mean, I have no doubt of it. And I know my rabbi disagrees with me, and I'm not, this is just, I mean, I'm just a person. So, I'm not, and this is just only a few people are ever going to see this, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm really convinced that the Torah was written around the third century BC because this was happening at a time when, and it's not that there's Greek ideas specifically in the text, but there's Greek ways of looking at this kind of access to language, what the fruits of these languages are. I mean, the Babylonians sort of tried to do it, but the Babylonians didn't have the creativity. They didn't have the Greek method. I mean, what the Greeks brought to these texts and what they brought to I mean, why the Greeks are really, the people that we in the West, when we study philosophy, we study Greek philosophy, is because the Greeks, they did something which is very interesting because they finally they separated themselves from the text. They completely, like, up until this time. And this is all just me just spinning stories in my head. Okay, I've just got to be honest. This is me spinning stories in my head. But what had happened up until this time was that as people were following these chains of text, because the text had transformed how people experience the world. The text really had completely foundationally reinterpreted reality for people. I mean, the text is really driving world history. And, I mean, the redactors of the Torah understand this. They understand the power of the text. They understand what the text can do. And so they're, what the redactors of, I mean, I don't want to blame these people because they have some really interesting ideas, just like the Greeks did. I mean, what I wanted to say about the Greeks was that what the Greeks did was the Greeks completely severed the text from their observation. They were sort of like back to nature kind of people. The Greeks said, okay, we have all this stuff. It's coming in from all around the world. There's all these texts. They have all these different ideas. There's all this stuff going on. But what we're going to do is we're going to observe the natural world and we're going to create a natural philosophy, you know. And and so the Greeks understood that there was something about the mind that was related to the text. The problem is that once you've stepped into the text, you can't ever get out of it. It's already shaped everything about you, and it's always there. You can't escape the text. Even the Greeks couldn't escape it, but the Greeks had a different approach to it. And the approach that the Greeks had turned out to be the right approach. I mean, it was the one that actually carried us into modernity. But the the Hebrew version of the text, I mean the the Hasmonean version of the text also carried us into modernity because they had another idea about the text. And what the Hasmoneans thought, what the redactors of the Torah thought was they realized, like, this text can take us anywhere. It's it can take us anywhere we want to go. So, as long as this text can take us anywhere we want to go, let's imagine a just world. Let's imagine a world where the text incorporates these human values that foundationally say human beings are valued. They're discrete. They're like every human being is like a universe in and of itself. And somehow they encoded that into their text. And it's really amazing because it's carried through all the way into modernity. And it's so much more important to the average person than anything that science can ever offer. And it's because it offers this archetype, this blueprint for this idea that people are valuable in and of themselves. And that's the idea that the Hasmoneans kind of surreptitiously stuck into the text. Their version of it was, it really only applied to their people, but they created a god. They created this entity that really it applied to everyone. And there's even hints of that in the text too, although there's also places where it's not true. And we're still sitting around arguing over this, this stuff that was invented basically by these people thousands of years ago. Well, anyhow, so I've done my normal like half an hour rambling before I even start the text. So I'm going to just read some text now. This is really fun stuff. I'm going to start with chapter 11. I think that's the only part of the text I'll actually get to. Um, but here goes. Okay. The people took to complaining bitterly before God. God heard and was incensed. A fire of God broke out against them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp. So, what are the people complaining about in the story? The people are complaining because they've been dragged out of their in the story. In the story, they're complaining because they've been dragged out of slavery in Egypt and out into the desert, and they don't have anything that they need. So in the tradition, this is supposed to be about these people have to grow up. Like it's the way that it's told is, oh, these people, they have to grow up, and basically the God creator person is their divine parent. And the only way that they're ever going to mature is to kind of heed his authority and to learn to accept his authority as their God, and through Moses. So you can see right away what the intent of the text is. I mean, it's very naked in its ambition. I mean, the text is really explaining to you what the function of the text is. I mean, it's and it assumes things. It assumes things, and to me, the interesting place to be as an atheist is in the world of imagining what these redactors are thinking, because the redactors are thinking that by 2,300 years ago, the redactors are thinking that everybody understands what a god is, and they understand that the God is the God of everything. So this is what the redactors are thinking. They think that there's enough cultural currency that people understand that. And so part of what the redactors are doing is the redactors are accepting this, they're telling you what is considered common knowledge within their time period. And so there's this idea that everyone is carrying around with them of a monotheism. It's not necessarily a monotheism because the text itself is highly polytheistic, but it's a certain kind of a monotheism. I mean, it's this idea that there's this understanding, and it goes even deeper than that. I mean, what it's really working with is it's really manipulating this idea that everybody in your society is fundamentally religious, that what's of most concern to them is the state of their soul and the state of their identity as fragile beings who don't know the answers, don't understand what the world is, and have to rely on some kind of supernatural, their connection with some sort of deeper supernatural spirituality in order to kind of guide them from day to day. And so this idea, which it's rooted in, I mean, a lot of things, um, is still the essence of what religion is today. I mean, nothing's changed about that. That's the same thing. And it's to me, this is why Democritus' ideas were so radical at the time. I mean, and Democritus had already lived and died by the time this text was redacted. I mean, he had lived and died, and he had been gone for at least 200 years. But oh, I didn't finish telling the story of Democritus, how we got his ideas, because it's really interesting. It's a great story. So after Democritus died, Plato um uh just he hated Democritus. He hated Democritus' ideas because he believed that the world was supernatural. So he believed not not in a very specific kind of, I mean, he definitely he believed that there was like an ideal world and that this world wasn't the ideal world. And so Plato's ideas got picked up by the West over time, and they got carried all the way through history into modernity, into the time that we live in now. And we still basically follow Plato's ideas. And Plato's ideas are still kind of how governments see themselves and how religions see themselves and kind of how people imagine God. Those are kind of Plato's ideas. But we also have Democritus's ideas because Democritus was saying, no, the universe is materialistic. It's made up of matter, it's made up of atoms. It has laws, and the laws are the same everywhere. And I mean, he didn't understand everything. I mean, God, he didn't have anything to work with except his reason. So, but his ideas were rejected. They were rejected even in his time. Just so rejected. And the only reason that we even know Democritus existed is because one of the funny things that the Greeks did, and in Jewish tradition we do this too, is they write everything down. They they were doing like a version of the Talmud, hundreds of years before the Talmud was ever created, because the Greeks would have these dialogues. They wrote down their dialogues, and they used their dialogues to teach with. And in their dialogues, they would preserve both the majoritarian opinion, you know, Plato's opinion, and then they would argue against the minoritarian opinion, against the minority opinion. And what they did in arguing against the minority opinion, like in Democritus, I mean, Democritus wrote so much. He wrote all these books, but over time, all of his books disappeared. But what the Greeks did was they wrote down trying to contradict Democritus and his ideas. They actually preserved his ideas because they were arguing against them. And so Democritus's ideas got preserved in one way in the text of the dialogues. And so everybody argued against Democritus's ideas for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, because they read the Greek texts of the majority that preserved their opinion. But another way that Democritus's ideas were preserved, really the way they were really preserved, was his most essential books uh, were preserved by a Roman poet almost 200 years later, who had read Democritus's texts in their original. He had read the text in the original, and he had written a kind of a Latin poetry version of basically the essence of Democritus's ideas. And that text, which is, again, it's just a copy, it's a Roman copy with some reinterpretations by a Roman poet philosopher. But that text then ended up in a monastery in Germany where it sat for hundreds of years when nobody looked at it. I mean, somehow these texts that had been written by the Romans, I mean, the Catholics preserved Roman texts because Catholicism is a Roman religion. And those texts were copied or in their original, they were just preserved because one of the things that the Catholic tradition done was it created monasteries. And so they were really just reproducing what the Greeks had already done, and what Alexander the Great's probably his greatest contribution to world history was, besides the spread of Greek ideas, was, supporting the foundation of libraries. And, once it wasn't just his idea, the Babylonians had a similar idea, but but uh, during the time of Alexandria, the idea of libraries were really born. And the Greeks in their own way, I mean, the Catholics in their own way tried to preserve the same kind of idea through their monasteries. Anyways, so this copy of a text of Democritus's original thinking was preserved by this Roman poet philosopher, and it ended up in a Greek, no, it ended up in a German monastery, and it was in terrible condition, but I guess it was readable. And during the Renaissance, and right before the Renaissance, actually, in the 14th century, there was someone who was really interested, an Italian humanist, who was interested in buying out Roman texts. He was looking for a text that he felt kind of he was onto something. The Italian humanists understood that there were some ideas in in Rome that had been preserved by the writers that were really important. And so he was looking for a text that contained really interesting ideas that appealed to him as an Italian humanist in the 14th century. And he found this text that basically said, oh, the world is made of atoms and everything in the universe is the same everywhere. And it had the essence of Democritus's thought. And he bought the text from the Germans. He brought it back to Italy and had it copied. And then that text was widely distributed during the Renaissance. And Democritus's ideas became foundational to the Renaissance. They became foundational to really the birth of science and the understanding of the universe as we know it now. I mean, everything that's given us the world that we understand now, including using this computer, came from the principles that were outlined in Democritus' thought. And the reason that this happened, I mean, and this is something that the redactors of the Torah understood too. The reason that this happened was because of the text. I mean, the redactors really understood the power of the text. And that's why. And so, what the redactors of the Torah offered the text that was like so important, it was just as important as what Democritus did. And this is where I diverge from Madeline Murray here. This is where I really do diverge from her. And this is the part of me that who knows, maybe it's just my indoctrination, or maybe it's something that I really believe. But the redactors of the text, like they thought, well, we see how brutal the world is. I mean, we understand how terrible everything, because I mean, there was so much trauma and so much suffering going on all the time in the ancient world. It's just unbelievable the things people had to go through. It was horrible. And but they understood that there was something about I mean, humans beings, even though they didn't have the word for it at the time, they understood that there was some fundamental essential human nature. Like somehow human beings had some fundamental right to autonomy, to dignity, to uh, they had all of the rights that the elites had. I think that's really what it is. I mean, I think that on some foundational level, there was this belief that ordinary people basically deserved everything that the elites deserved too. And the person who, but they couldn't just have it. They couldn't just have what the elites had. And so the placeholder for them was their God. So they made this God, this deity, and the deity somehow preserved the essence of their rights. I mean, I think this is what religion has always done. It preserved the essence of what they believed were their rights. But it was encoded in this grand mythical narrative that like stretches out over the generation. Oh, hey, sorry, cat drama. Anyways, okay, so let's read a little bit more. I've hardly gotten through any text today. I've just been going on and on about Democritus and the Greeks. Okay, so the people were complaining. The people took to complaining bitterly before God. God heard and was incensed. A fire of God broke out against them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp. The people cried out to Moses. Moses prayed to God, and the fire died down. The place was named Taberah because a fire of God had broken out against them. Now, what are the ideas in the text? I think this is about all I'll get to. Oh, there's so much in here, though. It's too bad. There's really so much in here that's really, it's not only is it fun, it's fun to make, like to poke at as an atheist, and it's an interesting experiment, but it's also, these are a lot of the things that are in this particular parsha are the tools that religion has continued to employ for, for a couple of thousand years now and not longer to maintain belief. So there's definitely claims to the supernatural here. There's a lot of claims to the supernatural. There's divine intercession here. There's the idea that there's this divine intercession. There's the transformation of food. So there's the idea that there's the sustenance, the manna, is this idea that somehow the divine like feeds you. So what's happening here is that the redactors of the text are creating this divinity in this particular section of the text that like feeds the people, that leads them around everywhere that they're supposed to go, that protects them, and that all they have to do is to um, maintain their faith in their divine being. And as long as they do that, and in the authority of the person who's their representative, which is Moses. And all of this is a placeholder for the Hasmoneans. So the Hasmoneans are basically saying that as long as you believe in us, the priest kings, then everything that we do will be right because it's been justified and it's been like reinforced by this system that was, we've invented this mythopoetic like history that, hang on just a minute. Anyhow, so they're saying that this mythopoetic system that was invented by them as the foundation of their authority as priest kings. And in a way, they're saying the same thing that every religious caste always says. I mean, and there's been variations in history of priest castes and of priests which are separated from the political authority. Here, the priest caste is the political authority, and that's really where this text comes from. I mean, this text comes from a place where there's no separation of church and state. Church and state are basically the same. So, this idea is very ancient. I mean, we're kind of catching this midway through our world history. I mean, this is very, oh, by the way, that's the sun just poking out over the edge there. So these are very ancient ideas, and they're just being kind of shopped in a new way. They're kind of being marketed in a new kind of way through this invention of language. And even though it seems like this is just about Israel and it's just about these people, it's really not. I mean, this is really a universal story. It's a story that happens over and over again in the Levant. It doesn't just happen here, but here the people wrote it down, and they wrote down they made a mythology. They made a mythology that was really compelling and that carried people through. So let me read just a little bit more. I think I'm pretty much near the end of my time. Um, the riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving. The Israelites wept and said, "If we only had meat to eat." We remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our gullets are shriveled. There's nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look to. Now manna was like coriander seed, and its color was like bdellium. The people would go about and gather it, grind it between millstones or pound it into mortar, boil it into a pot, and make it into cakes. It tasted like rich cream. When the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall upon it. So that's really cool. I mean, it's very creative. They've thought of this idea. It's very creative. And so they're taking something supernatural. So the people are basically eating the supernatural. Anyways, that's all I have time for. Hardly got to any text as always, but I did get to say what I wanted to say. And I guess that's the whole reason I'm doing this. So thanks a lot for spending another week with me on Atheist Torah Study. This was Parsha Beha'alotcha, and my name is Emma. And I thank you for spending time with me if you've sat through this whole thing. And I'll see you next week. We're almost done. I'm so excited. It's where I'm at right now, it's June. And we basically go until early September, and then it's all over with. Um, so then I will be done with this. But it's been a fun exploration. Thanks so much for joining me.